I give away free Steam games with every major video I do, and here's who won this week. The games available to receive are listed below. To enter, just leave a comment and have contact information on your profile. And now, on with the video. I'm playing something almost every week, and sometimes I want to talk about it and give you a vertical slice. So stick with me for some lightning reviews. This week, on the chopping block. This week I played Inside. I played a video game that has the title Inside, not the notion of me entertaining myself within a residence or domicile. I have about 3 other games that I'm currently playing or intending on playing, but they're all proving to be outside the scope of my usual weekly time constraints, so I figured I'd touch on Inside. Plus, one of my subscribers really seemed to go to bat for this when it came up on a community poll, so here we are. Inside is a bleak, realistic platformer where you control a small child through a world of hazards, disturbing imagery, and instantaneous death. This is not to be confused with Playdead's previous title, Limbo, also a bleak, realistic platformer where you control a small child through a world of hazards, disturbing imagery, and instantaneous death. At least they know their comfort zone, which is an ironic choice of words because their games continually make me feel immensely uncomfortable. In fact, if I had to review Inside in a single sentence, I would choose thusly: the most uncomfortable platformer that I'd gladly replay in a given afternoon. Then again, even an afternoon might be charitable, because with my most recent playthrough, if I were to cut all the deaths from my run, I'm fairly confident that it would take me less than 2 hours to go from start to end credits. Not that those 2 hours would be considered insubstantial. While an individual playthrough might be shorter than the runtime of some movies, the symbolism and environmental details are rich and weighty. In fact, this is another perfect example of a game that tells you nothing but shows you everything you need to know from the very moment you start playing. When you press start on a fresh run, you're not given a text blurb, any opening exposition, or even a settings menu. Your character just appears on screen and you're immediately given control. Within the first 5 minutes, you can establish the basics of what you need to grasp the situation. People are being harvested. If you're seen, then you're either shot on sight or vicious dogs are sicked on you. Whatever organization is behind the insidious plot believes that survivors and witnesses are just not worth the trouble. Even children. With the tone established, Inside then moves to lay out its style of gameplay. I said before it's a realistic platformer, which basically means that you're only able to jump about as high and far as the average human. Plus, falling more than 10 feet will likely mean severe injury and then respawning. Similarly, it's not just unrealistic platforming expectations that may kill you. As I mentioned before, dark forces and groups would sooner see you dead than look at you, and while the game doesn't focus on twitch responses, the platforming and puzzles that it does present put tremendous emphasis on observation and planning. It wants you to focus on timing and careful forethought before executing your best attempt at survival, but this means that even a careless move will mean an unceremonious or brutal end. Fortunately, the game is well paced so that even when death does come, it doesn't fixate on the failure or dwell too long, and you're never sent back more than a minute or two. Unfortunately, that doesn't entirely mitigate the frustration. There's a few in-game segments and puzzles that I would argue don't serve much relevant expansion for the plot, and in fact may be counter to how things progress later, particularly in a section where you have to traverse bodies of water with a merchild that remains entirely inactive and sinks to the bottom of the water while you're dry, but the second you touch moisture, he viciously comes to drag you down. The languid movement speed of this section, and the slow and deliberate pace of how the puzzle progresses, in spite of being aware of the solution and simply having it be a matter of execution, becomes quite a factor of irritation, which says nothing about the story development that happens in one of these segments. I died to this child several times, even on my most recent playthrough, but after progressing far enough, you eventually encounter a section where you're supposed to get grabbed by the child, supposedly dragged to your death, but then experience some sort of mysterious factor that grants you the ability to breathe underwater as part of the story. Dissonant gameplay and narrative elements aside, I do feel that much of the frustration or oppressive mood the game hammers you with is intended. Reflecting on my latest run, there was no point where I would say that I was feeling jovial or happy. Engaged, definitely, and satisfied with some of the platforming and puzzling, but as I said close to the start, the feeling I found myself most familiar with at any given moment was uncomfortable. The imagery alone was often grotesque or dehumanizing, from parasites seemingly taking control of livestock to instill a murderous frenzy, to people being brainwashed until they're nothing more than flesh automatons to be designated as disposable equipment. Even the audio does a tremendous job of relaying the sense of unease, especially when things go deathly silent. Alright, I've managed to avoid most things spoilers so far, so from here on out I'll be discussing story elements, the ending, and arguably some of the most disturbing parts of the game. So for those that want to experience it for themselves and haven't done so already, I'll see you next week. For those that have played it, or don't care, let's continue. So as you control your character further into this adventure, you find yourself wandering into a massive industrial facility, and finally an office complex. All the while you're seeing signs that there are effectively two societies, with the one that you come from being used to feed a need for what I interpret as labor or experimentation. There's metaphors and symbolism abound, but you can also just take it on face value. Of course, I don't know what to think about the last few minutes of the game. In your endeavor to undo the nefarious schemes that whatever planners have been enacting, you eventually find yourself trying to free, but then getting absorbed into and controlling a swirling mass of flesh. Seemingly almost immune to damage, but rampaging through the offices and labs while looking like a disembodied scrotum. Finally, after your rampage has ceased, you eventually escape the building with one last tumble down a cliffside, and the game ends after you come to rest with a lone ray of sunshine symbolizing that there is nothing more to do. Inside isn't one of my favorites of all time, and it's certainly not one that I play for a sense of joy, but it leaves a stark impression on me, and because of the bleak and fever dream-induced imagery, I'd recommend it as one that most should try if they have a free afternoon. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm trying to figure out whether I should devote my time going forward to Unicorn Overlord or the Stalker series. Let me know in the comments. Hey, look at that, it's the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember that commenting can actually win you a free prize. So until next time, this is Gheeotine saying thanks for watching and keep your head on your shoulders.